The human fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Zenthar system. 200 ships appeared in perfect formation. The sight was magnificent and terrifying at the same time. Admiral Tae Yang stood on the bridge of the Sovereign. Around him, his officers worked quietly and efficiently. There was no panic, no fear. Just professionals doing their duty. Vexthor's forces are positioned around the planet, Captain Ha-Jun reported. 50 warships. They have activated weapons and shields. Open a channel to all ships in the system, Tae Yang ordered. All frequencies. Channel open, sir. Tae Yang spoke clearly and calmly. This is Admiral Tae Yang of the Human Systems Alliance. We come in peace. We are here to prevent unnecessary bloodshed. Any council vessel that wishes to stand down will be granted safe passage. We have no quarrel with those who seek peace. He paused, then continued. To those who choose to fight, understand this. We do not wish to harm you, but we will defend ourselves and those who cannot defend themselves. Choose wisely. The message repeated on all frequencies. Every ship in the system heard it. Every sailor and officer had to make a choice. On Vexthor's flagship, the Pride of Zenthar, the bridge crew listened in silence. Many looked uncertain. They had families on the planet below. They knew the human fleet could destroy them easily. Vexthor stood rigid with anger. Do not listen to their lies. They are invaders. We will defend our home. All ships prepare to engage. But 3 ships immediately broke formation and moved away. Their captains refused to fight. Then 5 more ships departed. Then 10. Within minutes, Vexthor's fleet had shrunk to 20 vessels. 20 captains who remained loyal, either from duty or fear. The human fleet did not attack the departing ships. They let them go peacefully, just as Tae Yang promised. 20 ships remaining hostile, Ha-Jun reported. Should we engage? Not yet, Tae Yang said. Give them more time to reconsider. On the planet below, billions watched through broadcasts. The council chamber had been evacuated except for a few brave representatives who refused to leave. The Keltharian ambassador and the Morvian delegate stood together watching the sky. Will they attack the city? Someone asked nervously. No, the Keltharian ambassador said with certainty. They are not monsters. They proved that already. Vexthor watched his fleet shrink and felt desperation growing. Everything he had built was collapsing. But he would not surrender. He could not. Target the human flagship, Vexthor commanded. All ships fire at will. The Pride of Zenthar opened fire. 19 other ships followed. Energy beams and missiles filled the space between the fleets. The human fleet activated their defenses. Point defense systems shot down missiles. Shields absorbed energy blasts. Not a single human ship was damaged. Return fire, Tae Yang said quietly. Disable only. Target their weapons and engines. Human ships responded with perfect accuracy. They did not aim for bridges or life support. They targeted weapon systems and engine cores. Within 2 minutes, 15 of Vexthor's ships were dead in space, their crews alive but helpless. 5 ships remained functional. 4 of them immediately ceased fire and broadcast surrender signals. Only the Pride of Zenthar continued fighting. Focus on the flagship, Tae Yang ordered. Captain Ha-Jun, you have tactical command. Ha-Jun coordinated the Sovereign's attack. The human flagship was larger and faster than the Pride. Ha-Jun maneuvered smoothly, avoiding enemy fire while targeting weak points. The Pride tried to fight back, but Vexthor's crew were afraid and disorganized. Their shots went wide. Their movements were predictable. Within 5 minutes, the Pride's weapons were destroyed. Its engines were disabled. The ship floated helplessly, surrounded by human vessels. Send boarding teams, Tae Yang said. General Bo-Ra, bring me Vexthor. Alive. Yes, sir, Bo-Ra replied. Transport ships carried human soldiers to the Pride. They cut through the airlock and entered the disabled flagship. The Pride's crew offered no resistance. They were exhausted and defeated. General Bo-Ra led her team to the bridge. They found Vexthor still in his command chair, staring at blank screens. His blue skin had lost its glow. He looked old and tired. Council Leader Vexthor, Bo-Ra said formally, you are under arrest for crimes against peace and illegal military action. You will stand trial before the Galactic Council. Vexthor looked at her. Why do you not kill me? I tried to destroy your species. I attacked your people without cause. Bo-Ra's expression was calm. Because we are not the monsters you claimed we were. You will face justice, not revenge. You will have a fair trial. That is what civilized beings do. Vexthor had no response. Human soldiers escorted him from the bridge. The broadcast of his arrest went across the entire galaxy. Citizens everywhere watched the former council leader being taken into custody by the very species he had tried to destroy. Many felt satisfaction at seeing justice done. Others felt shame for believing his lies. On the planet below, the council chamber filled with representatives again. With Vexthor gone, they could finally act freely. The Keltharian ambassador took temporary leadership. "We must rebuild our government," she said. The old system was corrupt. "We need reform." "Agreed," said the Morvian delegate. "And we must formally apologize to humanity for 200 years of injustice." "More than apologize," another representative added. "We should offer them full council membership immediately." The vote was unanimous. Every species present agreed. Humanity deserved a place in galactic civilization. Ambassador Da-Un was invited to the chamber. She walked to the center platform where she had stood days before. But the atmosphere was completely different now. Before, she faced suspicion and hostility. Now she saw respect and gratitude. "Ambassador Da-Un," the Keltharian ambassador said warmly, "on behalf of the Galactic Council, I apologize for the terrible wrong done to your people. The exile was unjust. The attacks were criminal. We cannot undo the past, but we can offer you a better future." She paused, then continued. "The Council formally invites humanity to join as full members. We also nominate you, Ambassador Da-Un, to serve on the Leadership Council. Will you accept?" Da-Un felt emotions rising, but kept her voice steady. "On behalf of humanity, we accept. But we do so with conditions." "What conditions?" the Morvian delegate asked. "That the Council reforms its structure," Da-Un said firmly. "No more monopolies on technology. No more exile without fair trial. No more concentrating power in single leaders who can abuse it. If we join, we help create a better system for everyone." The representatives considered this. Then, one by one, they nodded agreement. "We accept your conditions," the Keltharian ambassador said. "Help us build something better." The chamber erupted in applause. For the first time in 200 years, humans were truly part of the galactic community. On the Sovereign, Admiral Tai Yang received the news. He allowed himself a small smile. The mission was complete. Humanity had proven its worth not through conquest, but through honor. "What are your orders, Admiral?" Captain Hajun asked. "Begin patrol operations," Tai Yang said. "Work with Council forces to secure the borders. Show them how allies operate together." "And our fleet?" General Bora asked. "We remain ready," Tai Yang replied. "Not to threaten, but to protect. The galaxy is vast. There are dangers out there beyond politics. We will stand guard against those dangers." Over the following weeks, human ships began joint operations with Council forces. At first, the cooperation was awkward. Centuries of separation had created different tactics and procedures, but humans adapted quickly, and Council forces learned from human innovation. Human technology was shared freely. Medical advances, agricultural techniques, engineering breakthroughs, everything humanity had developed during exile became available to all Council species. In return, humans learned about galactic culture. They established embassies on dozens of worlds. Human students attended Council universities. Human artists collaborated with alien musicians and painters. Slowly, the wounds began to heal. Vexthor stood trial 6 months later. The evidence against him was overwhelming. He had ordered illegal attacks.
He had lied about humanity's exile.
He had abused his power for personal gain. The Council found him guilty on all charges. But following human advice, they showed mercy. Instead of execution, Vexthor received exile to a remote colony. He would live out his days isolated, as he had forced humanity to live. Some thought the punishment was too light. Others saw the poetry in it. Vexthor would experience personally the pain he had inflicted on others. 5 years passed. Human colonies spread across the galaxy. Not through conquest, but through peaceful settlement and cooperation. Humans and aliens lived side by side, learning from each other. Trade flourished. Art and culture mixed in beautiful new ways. Scientific research accelerated as humans and aliens shared knowledge. The galaxy became safer. Human military tactics combined with Council resources to eliminate piracy and defend against external threats. No enemy could stand against the unified strength of all civilized species working together. Admiral Te Yang retired after 5 years of service. He had accomplished everything he set out to do. Humanity was respected, accepted, and valued throughout the galaxy. At his retirement ceremony, leaders from 50 species came to honor him. The Keltharian ambassador spoke for all of them. The council chamber was massive. Crystal walls stretched up so high that the ceiling disappeared into darkness. Seats carved from stone and metal filled the circular room in rising tiers. Each seat held a representative from a different species. Some looked almost human. Others were so strange that Jiwon Hyun still felt uncomfortable looking at them. Even after 3 years of diplomatic service, Jiwon sat in the human section with her small team. Captain Minho stood behind her in his dress uniform. His face showed nothing, but Jiwon knew he was counting exits and calculating threats. That was what military advisors did. Beside her, trade liaison Yunji reviewed data on a small tablet. The device looked primitive compared to the holographic displays other species used, but it worked. The quarterly session was about to begin. Jiwon had attended 5 of these meetings since humanity joined the Galactic Trade Council. They always followed the same pattern: reports on trade volumes, disputes between member species, proposals for new regulations. It was boring but important work. Earth's economy depended on access to galactic markets. Chairman Vorlix entered from the central door. He was a crystalline, a being made entirely of living crystal that pulsed with internal light. He was also 3 meters tall and had no face that Jiwon could recognize. His voice came from somewhere inside his body, translated automatically into every language in the chamber. The session began with standard business. A mining dispute between the Catharan and the Velocians was resolved. New safety standards for antimatter transport were approved. Jiwon only half listened. Nothing on today's agenda directly affected humanity. Then Vorlix's light shifted from blue to red. That meant something important was coming. The chamber grew quiet. Even the constant whisper of translation devices faded. Vorlix stood at the center platform and began to speak about the annual tribute. Jiwon felt her stomach tighten. She had read about the tribute in the council charter, but Earth had been too new to pay it yet. Their exemption had just ended. Every member species contributed resources to the council each year. The tribute funded council operations, maintained trade routes, and supported the enforcement fleets that kept peace in contested regions. At least that was the official explanation. Jiwon had studied the actual numbers. Most of the tribute went to the oldest and most powerful species. It was wealth extraction disguised as membership fees. Vorlix began listing the tribute demands for each species. The Catharan would provide 60% of their industrial output. The Velocians would supply 70% of their agricultural production. Smaller species paid in specialized resources or services. Each amount was carefully calculated based on planetary wealth and production capacity. Each amount was also far higher than seemed fair. Then Vorlix turned toward the human section. His light pulsed brighter. Jiwon straightened in her seat. Behind her, she heard Minho shift his weight. Vorlix's translated voice filled the chamber with humanity's tribute requirements. 40% of all refined metals from Earth and her colonies. 25% of agricultural output from all human worlds. Exclusive mining rights to the entire asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter for 100 standard years. Additional requirements included technology transfers, educational access for council species to human universities, and regular inspections of human military facilities. The numbers hit Jiwon like physical blows. 40% of refined metals would cripple Earth's manufacturing. Losing a quarter of food production would cause shortages across every human world. The asteroid belt represented trillions in mineral wealth and was humanity's primary source of rare elements needed for advanced technology. Giving it away for a century would destroy any hope of economic independence. Around the chamber, other delegates watched the human section. Some showed curiosity. A few displayed what might have been sympathy. The Catharan representative, a male named Taeyang with 4 arms and golden skin, actually smiled. His translator let out a sound that might have been a laugh. He remembered when his people had first received their tribute demand. They had protested. They had threatened to leave the council. In the end, they had paid. Everyone always paid. The Velocian delegate, a female named Nari with pale blue skin and enormous eyes, kept her expression neutral. Her species had been paying tribute for so long that resistance was not even a memory. They simply accepted it as the cost of galactic civilization. Smaller species watched with the resignation of those who had never had any choice at all. Vorlix finished reading the requirements. His light shifted to a questioning yellow. He asked the formal question that ended every tribute announcement. Did the human delegation accept the terms as stated? Standard protocol allowed for immediate acceptance or a request for deliberation time. No one ever actually refused. G1 stood slowly. Every eye in the chamber focused on her. She was tall for a human woman, but tiny compared to most species here. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple style. Her diplomatic uniform was plain, compared to the elaborate garments other ambassadors wore. She looked young and inexperienced. That was fine. She had learned that being underestimated was sometimes useful. She spoke clearly in English, letting the translation systems handle the rest. Humanity requested the standard 7-day deliberation period as allowed under council regulations. Her voice did not shake. She did not ask questions or make arguments. She simply invoked her right to time. Vorlix's light flickered through several colors that G1 had not learned to interpret yet. Then he returned to blue, which meant acceptance. The deliberation period was granted. Humanity had 7 standard days to prepare their response. The session would reconvene at that time to receive their formal answer. Around the chamber, delegates relaxed. This was expected. Every species asked for deliberation time when first confronted with tribute demands. They used those days to rage and argue and search for alternatives. Then they accepted. The pattern had repeated for thousands of years across hundreds of species. Humanity would be no different. Taeyang leaned over to another Catharan and spoke in their clicking language. The translation systems did not pick it up, but G1 did not need a translator. His body language was clear. He was already planning how to acquire some of humanity's tribute for his own species. The asteroid belt would be redistributed among the powerful. Earth would get nothing. The session moved on to other business. Ji-won sat back down. Her hands were steady, but her mind was racing. 7 days. They had 7 days to decide the future of every human being in the galaxy. 7 days to choose between economic slavery and whatever alternative they could find. 7 days to do what no other species had successfully done in 3,000 years of council history. Behind her, Captain Minho leaned close and whispered a single word. Now. It was time to activate the plans they had been preparing in secret for the past 2 years. Plans that most of Earth's government did not even know existed. Plans based on the possibility that this exact situation would eventually occur. Ji-won gave a tiny nod. When the session ended an hour later, the human delegation filed out quietly. They did not speak to other ambassadors. They did not stop for the informal discussions that usually happened in the corridors after meetings. They walked directly to their quarters in the diplomatic sector. Only when the doors were sealed and security confirmed did Ji-won allow herself to react. She sat down heavily in a chair. Yoonji immediately pulled up economic projections on the wall display. The numbers were even worse than Ji-won had calculated during the session. Minho stood by the communications console, ready to open secure channels to Earth. They had work to do. 7 days was not much time to change the galaxy. 7 days passed quickly. The council chamber filled with delegates for the special session. Everyone wanted to witness humanity's response. Tribute announcements were routine, but watching new species accept their place in the galactic order was always entertaining. Some would argue. A few would make dramatic speeches. In the end, they all submitted. Taeyang arrived early and chose a seat with a good view of the human section. He had already negotiated with 2 other Catharan officials about dividing up Earth's asteroid belt mining rights. The council would redistribute the tribute among senior members. His family owned industrial facilities that desperately needed the rare elements those asteroids contained. This was going to be profitable. Nari entered quietly and sat in the Velocian section. She felt vague sympathy for the humans. She remembered when her species had been new to the council. They had also believed they might find some way to avoid tribute. That hope had died quickly. Now the Velocians accepted their role. They paid what was demanded and survived. It was not a good life, but it was life. Smaller species filled the upper tiers. Representatives from dozens of worlds that had no real power, but were required to attend major sessions. They whispered among themselves, placing bets on how long the humans would argue before accepting. The shortest estimate was 5 minutes. The longest was an hour. No one bet on refusal? That would be insane. Chairman Vorlix entered precisely on time. His crystalline body pulsed with formal blue light. He moved to the central platform and called the session to order. The chamber fell silent. Translation devices activated across hundreds of seats. This was the moment everyone had come to see. The human delegation entered last. Jiwan walked in front, wearing the same plain diplomatic uniform she had worn 7 days ago. Behind her came Captain Minho in full military dress. Then Somin, Yunji, and Junho. They did not look defeated. They did not look resigned. That was interesting. Most species showed at least some sign of acceptance by now. The humans took their seats. Jiwan placed nothing on the desk in front of her. No data tablets. No prepared statements. No documents. Just empty hands and a calm expression. Around the chamber, some delegates leaned forward. This was unusual. Species that intended to accept tribute usually brought extensive documentation, compliance reports, resource allocation plans, transportation schedules. Vorlix began with the formal protocol. He recited the tribute requirements again. 40% of refined metals, 25% of agricultural production, exclusive mining rights to the asteroid belt, technology transfers, educational access, military inspections. The list went on. His translated voice echoed through the chamber. Every word was recorded. Every requirement was legally binding once accepted. When Vorlix finished, he asked the formal question. Did humanity accept the tribute terms as stated? The question that ended every deliberation period. The question that had only one acceptable answer. He probably expected a long speech. Humans liked speeches. They would talk about cooperation and mutual benefit. They would express concerns about the burden. Then they would accept because they had no choice, G1 stood. The chamber's attention focused on her like a physical weight. She looked small standing alone on the floor. Most species sent multiple representatives to deliver tribute responses, teams of negotiators and legal experts. She had no one. Just herself and the 4 people sitting behind her. She looked up at Vorlix. Then she turned slowly, making eye contact with delegates around the chamber, the Catharan section, the Velosian seats, the smaller species in the upper tiers, even the most ancient civilizations who rarely paid attention to new members. She wanted them all to hear this clearly. Jiwan took a breath. She spoke in English. One word clear and final, a word that needed no translation because its meaning was universal, a word that every species understood in every language, the word that no one had expected to hear. No, silence. Complete and absolute silence. For 3 seconds, no one moved. No one spoke. Translation devices repeated the word in hundreds of languages. But the meaning was already clear. The humans had refused. Then chaos erupted. Taeyang jumped to his feet, shouting in his clicking language. His translator struggled to keep up. Impossible, unacceptable, they could not refuse. That was not how this worked. Nari dropped her datapad. The small device clattered on the stone floor. Around the chamber, delegates broke into loud conversations. Some shouted questions. Others demanded explanations. A few simply stared in shock. Vorlix's light shifted through colors rapidly. Red anger. Yellow confusion. Purple that might have meant disbelief. His voice boomed over the noise, translated into a command for silence. The chamber gradually quieted, but the tension remained. This had never happened before. Not in 3,000 years of council history. Species negotiated. Species complained. Species accepted. No one simply said no. Vorlix demanded clarification. Surely the humans misunderstood the process. The tribute was not optional. It was a condition of council membership. Did they not comprehend this basic fact? Perhaps their translation systems had malfunctioned. He would graciously allow them to reconsider their response. Jiwan remained standing. She repeated herself. Humanity did not accept the tribute terms. There was no misunderstanding. No translation error. They understood perfectly. The answer was no. Taeyang was shouting again. This was rebellion. This was a violation of council law. The humans should be expelled immediately. Their assets should be seized. Their trade agreements should be voided. Make them examples so no other species would ever try this stupidity. Other voices joined in. Some agreed with Taeyang. A few suggested giving the humans more time to reconsider. A small number stayed silent, watching carefully. The ancient species, the ones who had been part of the council for millennia. They did not shout or demand. They simply observed. This was new, and new things required careful thought. Vorlix called for order again. When the chamber quieted, he delivered the standard response to non-compliance. Humanity's membership in the Galactic Trade Council was suspended immediately. All trade agreements were voided. All economic relationships were terminated. The human delegation had 1 standard hour to evacuate council space. After that, enforcement fleets would be dispatched to remove them. Furthermore, economic sanctions were now in effect. The Galactic Banking Consortium would freeze all human accounts. Human ships would be denied access to council-controlled space. Any species that continued trading with humanity would face penalties. The isolation would be complete. Humanity would learn what happened to those who defied the council. Ji-won still did not move. She should have been gathering her things. She should have been rushing to leave before the enforcement deadline. Instead, she calmly reached into her jacket and pulled out a small device. She placed it on the desk and activated it. A holographic display materialized above the council floor. It showed star maps, fleet positions, military installations. The chamber grew quiet again as delegates tried to understand what they were seeing. Those were human territories. But the data showed things that should not exist. Hundreds of ships that Council intelligence had classified as civilian transports were revealed as military vessels. Mining operations in systems the Council thought were abandoned were actually forward operating bases. The asteroid belt, the prize the Council had demanded, was not an undefended resource zone. It was a fortress. Weapons platforms, defense grids, enough firepower to hold off a major fleet for weeks or months. Captain Minho stood and joined Ji-won at the floor. He took over the presentation. His voice was calm and professional. Military intelligence had mapped this entire sector. They knew where every council fleet was stationed. They had identified the critical trade routes. They had found the vulnerabilities in the quantum relay network. They had spent 2 years preparing for this moment. The hologram changed to show specific targets. 3 council core worlds within strike range of human weapons, major trade lanes that passed through human patrol zones, quantum relay nodes whose destruction would isolate entire sectors. Minho was not threatening. He was simply presenting facts. These are our capabilities. These are the consequences if you choose to enforce your demands. Could humanity win a war against the Council? No. The Council had superior numbers and technology. But winning was not the point. The point was cost. How much damage would the Council accept to collect tribute from one species? How many of their own worlds were they willing to see attacked? How much economic disruption would they tolerate? How long could they afford a war that benefited no one? The chamber was completely silent now. Delegates stared at the holographic displays. They were recalculating. Tribute was supposed to be easy. Demand resources from weak species who had no choice but to comply. This was not easy. This was complicated and dangerous and potentially very expensive. Ji-won spoke again. Humanity did not want war, but they would not accept slavery either. The tribute system was exploitation. It enriched the powerful and crushed the weak. Humanity was offering a different option: negotiate fair trade relationships, allow independent membership without tribute, prove that the Council could be something better than an empire disguised as a trade organization. The holographic display continued showing human military capabilities. Each new revelation made the situation more complicated. Council intelligence had badly underestimated humanity. That was clear now. The question was what to do about it. War was still an option, but it was no longer simple or cheap. Vorlix's crystalline body pulsed with deep red light, anger and something else. Uncertainty, perhaps. He had led the Council for 40 standard years. He had overseen hundreds of tribute collections. This had never happened. His authority was being challenged in front of the entire assembly. If he backed down, other species might try the same thing. But if he pushed forward into war, the costs could be catastrophic. He declared a recess. 3 hours for private deliberations. The ancient species would meet in closed council to decide how to respond. This was too important for a quick decision. The chamber began to empty, but slowly. Delegates clustered in small groups, speaking in urgent whispers. The galaxy had just shifted, and everyone was trying to understand what it meant for them. Taiyang stormed toward the human section. His forearms gestured wildly. His translator spat out angry words. The humans had lied. They had concealed military assets. They had violated a dozen council regulations about fleet disclosure. This was grounds for immediate sanctions, possibly even military action. The Catharan would support any measure to punish this betrayal. Minho stepped forward to intercept him. The captain was smaller than the Catharan, but he moved with confidence. He pointed out that council regulations did not actually require full military disclosure from member species. Only aggressive capabilities had to be reported. Everything humanity had shown was defensive. Weapons designed to protect their territory, not invade others. They had broken no laws, Taeyang sputtered. Defensive or not, the humans had hidden their strength. That was deceptive. That was dishonorable. Minho's expression did not change. He asked if the Catharan had disclosed all their military capabilities when they joined the council. Or had they also kept some secrets? The question hung in the air. Taeyang turned and stalked away without answering. Nari approached more carefully. The Velosian delegate looked troubled. She spoke quietly, asking if humanity understood what they had done. The council did not forgive defiance. Even if they avoided war, humanity would be isolated. No one would trade with them. No one would risk council anger by helping them. They would be alone. Jiwan met her eyes. She asked Nari how long the Velosians had been paying tribute. How much of their economy did they control? How many of their people lived free lives versus serving council demands? The questions were not cruel, just direct. Nari looked away. She had no answer. Or maybe the answer was too painful to speak aloud. Smaller species watched from a distance. They did not approach, but they did not leave either. Some looked frightened. Others showed cautious interest. A few had expressions that might have been hope. One delegate, a female from a species humanity had barely interacted with, gave a tiny nod before walking away. Recognition, perhaps, or solidarity. The human delegation returned to their quarters. The privacy field activated immediately. Solman pulled up economic projections. The sanctions would hurt. Frozen accounts meant no access to galactic currency. Trade restrictions would cut off supply chains. Earth could survive on internal resources, but the colonies would struggle. They had planned for this, but planning and experiencing were different things. Yunji was already receiving messages through back channels. Species that wanted to maintain trade relationships but could not do so publicly. Offers of secret agreements, suggestions for workarounds to avoid council detection. The galactic economy was more interconnected than the council liked to admit. Cutting off one major trading partner hurt everyone, not just the target. Junho monitored diplomatic communications. The ancient species were meeting in private, as Vorlex had announced. But junior delegates from dozens of species were having their own discussions. Some were angry at humanity's defiance. Others were fascinated. A few were quietly asking questions about how humanity had prepared, about whether resistance was really possible, about what it would cost to try. Minho reviewed military status reports from human territory. Fleets were on high alert. Defense platforms were fully armed. Crews were at battle stations. If the council chose war, humanity was ready. They would lose eventually, but they would make it expensive. Every ship destroyed. Every world threatened. Every trade route disrupted. The council would win, but they would pay a price that might not be worth the victory. The 3 hours passed slowly. Jiwan sat alone in a small side room, reviewing everything that had led to this moment. The discovery of the tribute system during initial trade negotiations. The realization that refusal was not considered an option. The decision to prepare secretly while appearing to comply. The approval from Earth's government to take this stand. All of it had led here. She thought about the other species. The Catharan who had submitted and now defended the system that exploited them. The Velosians who had forgotten what freedom felt like. The smaller species who paid tribute because they had no strength to resist. Was humanity different, or just too new to understand that resistance was futile? No, they were not naive. They understood the risks. They knew the council was powerful. But they also knew that accepting tribute meant eventual destruction. Slow erosion of independence. Generations living as servants. Humanity would rather face quick destruction fighting than slow death submitting. At least that death would mean something. A tone sounded. The recess was ending. The council was reconvening. Jiwan stood and straightened her uniform. Her team gathered in the main room. Minho checked his sidearm, a mostly symbolic weapon but a reminder of what they represented. Salman closed her economic displays. Yunji saved her diplomatic files. Junyo took a deep breath. They walked back to the council chamber together. The corridors were crowded with delegates returning to their seats. The atmosphere was different now. The usual casual conversations were gone. Everyone moved with purpose. Everyone understood that whatever happened next would be historic. The human delegation took their seats. Around them, hundreds of other species did the same. The chamber filled quickly. No one wanted to miss this. Vorlix entered and moved to the central platform. His light had changed to a color Jiwon had not seen before. A pale blue that was almost white. What did that mean? The chamber fell silent. Vorlix began to speak. His words were formal and careful. The council had deliberated. They had considered multiple factors. The tribute system was ancient and had maintained galactic order for millennia, but circumstances changed. New situations required new approaches. The council would demonstrate flexibility. Humanity's tribute would be reduced. Not eliminated, but substantially decreased. 5% of the original demand and resources. In exchange, humanity would assume defensive responsibilities in their sector. They would maintain trade routes. They would provide security against piracy and unauthorized incursions. They would contribute to galactic stability through service rather than pure resource extraction. It was not everything humanity wanted. It was still tribute, still a form of control. But it was survivable. Earth could pay 5% without destroying their economy. The colonies would not starve. The asteroid belt would remain human territory, and the precedent was established. The tribute system was no longer absolute. It could be negotiated. It could be changed. Taeyang was on his feet immediately. This was unacceptable. The council was rewarding defiance. Other species would see this and demand the same treatment. The tribute system would collapse. Chaos would follow. He demanded a vote to override this decision, but Vorlix raised one crystalline limb for silence. The decision was final. It had been approved by the ancient council. No vote would be held. Then he said something else, something that changed everything. The tribute review process was now open to all member species. Any species could request renegotiation of their terms. Each case would be evaluated individually. The chamber erupted. Not with anger this time, with hope, with possibility. Within seconds, Nari was on her feet requesting a Velocian review. 3 other delegates stood immediately after. Then 5 more. Then dozens. Species that had paid tribute for generations suddenly saw a chance to negotiate better terms. The floodgates had opened. Jiwon watched the chaos spread through the chamber. They had not destroyed the tribute system, but they had broken it. They had proven that it could be challenged. That resistance was possible. That one species saying no could change the calculations for everyone. The galaxy was different now, and humanity had done that. Beside her, Minho allowed himself a small smile. They had gambled everything on this moment, and somehow, impossibly, it had worked. The council session continued for 6 more hours. Species after species stepped forward to request tribute reviews. Some had legitimate cases. Others were simply trying their luck. Vorlix maintained order, but barely. The ancient system was crumbling, and everyone could feel it happening in real time. By the end of the session, 47 species had filed formal review requests. The council created a new committee to evaluate each case. They established criteria for reductions. They set up appeal processes. They were building bureaucracy to manage change they had never expected to face. The tribute system would survive, but in a different form. More negotiable, more fair, or at least less openly exploitative. Taeyang left the chamber without speaking to anyone. His plans to acquire human resources were destroyed. His government would not be pleased. The Catharan had built economic projections around that expected tribute. Now they would need to find other sources or accept shortfalls. He had learned an expensive lesson about making assumptions. Nari approached the human delegation as the session ended. She looked different, lighter somehow, as if a weight had been lifted. She thanked Jiwon quietly. The Velocians had been trapped for so long they had forgotten that escape was possible. Now they had hope again. It might take years to renegotiate their terms, but at least negotiation was happening. That was more than they had dared imagine yesterday. She asked how humanity had found the courage to refuse. Jiwon considered the question. Courage was not quite the right word. Necessity was closer. They had calculated the costs of submission and found them unacceptable. The choice had been between certain slow death or possible quick death. When those were the options, defiance was logical, not brave. Nari nodded slowly. She understood. The Velosians had faced the same choice generations ago. They had chosen differently. Now they had a chance to reconsider. She promised to share information about Council vulnerabilities that her species had discovered over decades of compliance. If humanity had started this change, Nari would help it continue. An unexpected visitor arrived as the humans prepared to leave. An ancient being that Jiwan had seen in the chamber but never met. She was called Elder Counselor Hana, and she represented the Praetorium, one of the galaxy's oldest civilizations. The Praetorium had been part of the Council since its founding 5,000 years ago. They rarely spoke, but when they did, everyone listened. Hana was humanoid in basic shape, but clearly not human. Her skin had a metallic sheen. Her eyes were completely black. She moved with the careful precision of someone very old and very patient. She requested a private conversation. Jiwan agreed, and they moved to a small meeting room away from the main chamber. Hana spoke in perfect English, not bothering with translation devices. She revealed something that changed Jiwan's understanding of everything that had just happened. The ancient species had known this moment was coming. Not specifically humanity's defiance, but the eventual collapse of the tribute system. Any structure built on extraction and fear contained the seeds of its own destruction. They had simply been waiting to see which species would be first to challenge it. The Praetorium and a few other ancient civilizations had stopped paying significant tribute centuries ago. They contributed token amounts, but nothing meaningful compared to their wealth. They had enough power that the Council could not force compliance. But they had also not tried to change the system. They had simply exempted themselves and let it continue for everyone else. Why? Jiwan asked. If they knew the system was unjust, why allow it to continue? Hana's response was uncomfortably honest. Because it was convenient. The tribute system maintained order. It kept newer species focused on survival rather than expansion. It prevented the chaos that might occur if every species pursued their own interests without constraint. The ancient civilizations had preserved the system because changing it required effort and created uncertainty. But now humanity had forced the change. And Hana admitted that was probably for the best. Stagnant systems eventually collapsed catastrophically. Gradual reform was better than sudden revolution. The Praetorium would support the new review process. They would advocate for fair negotiations, not because they were altruistic, but because managed change was safer than explosive upheaval. Then Hana issued a warning. Humanity had made enemies today. The Catharan were not the only species that profited from the old system. Several civilizations had built economies around tribute collection. They would not give up that wealth easily. Some would try to undermine human trade. Others might attempt sabotage or even limited military action. The Council would officially maintain peace, but unofficially things could get dangerous. There were also older threats. Powers beyond the Council's borders that had been watching humanity's rise with interest. Some saw potential allies. Others saw potential prey. By demonstrating military capability, humanity had announced their presence to entities that might not have noticed them otherwise. The galaxy was larger and more dangerous than the Council represented. Jiwan absorbed this information. She had known there would be consequences. You did not break a galactic paradigm without creating ripples, but hearing it stated plainly by someone with 5,000 years of perspective made it more real. Humanity had chosen a difficult path. The question now was whether they could walk it successfully. Hana offered one final piece of advice. Build alliances quickly. The species requesting tribute reviews would need support against those who wanted to maintain the old system. If humanity helped them, they would remember. Create a coalition of reformed tribute payers. Together, they would have enough strength to resist pressure from the holdouts. Alone, each species could be isolated and broken. The meeting ended. Hana left as quietly as she had arrived. Jiwan returned to her team and relayed everything. They had more work ahead. The council session might be over, but the real challenge was just beginning. They needed to contact Earth immediately, update their strategy, prepare for the resistance Hana had predicted. That night, Jiwan sat alone in her quarters and recorded a message to be sent home. She explained what had happened. The refusal, the military revelation, the negotiated compromise, the wave of review requests that followed. Everything that had changed in one day. She told Earth's government about the enemies they had made and the allies they needed to cultivate. She explained the threats from beyond Council space. She outlined the diplomatic and military preparations required. The message was long and detailed, but she wanted no misunderstandings about what humanity had just done. At the end, she added her personal assessment. They had taken an enormous risk. The galaxy would never be the same. Neither would humanity's place in it. They had proven that one species could stand against an ancient system and force change. But that proof had painted a target on humanity. Every ambitious species would test them. Every threatened power would try to undermine them. The question was not whether humanity could survive the attention. They had shown they could defend themselves. The question was whether they could build something better from the chaos they had created. Turn a broken tribute system into genuine cooperation. Transform fearful compliance into willing partnership. Create a galaxy where new species were not automatically exploited. That was the real test. Not the dramatic refusal in the council chamber. Not the military capability they had revealed. But the long, difficult work of building a different kind of galactic order, one based on mutual benefit instead of extraction, on negotiation instead of demands, on cooperation instead of submission. Jiwan sent the message and sat back. Outside her window, alien stars shone against the darkness. Somewhere among them were allies waiting to be found, and enemies planning their responses. The galaxy was vast and complex and dangerous, but it was also full of possibilities that had not existed yesterday. One word had changed everything. A simple refusal, no. Such a small word for such enormous consequences. But sometimes the most important things were the simplest. Stand for what you believe. Refuse what you cannot accept. Face the costs of your choices. Those were not complicated principles. They were just difficult to maintain when the pressure was enormous. Humanity had maintained them. Against a council that had stood for millennia. Against a tribute system that had crushed hundreds of species. Against the certainty that submission was inevitable. They had said no. And the galaxy had been forced to listen. The real work was beginning. Building coalitions. Maintaining defenses. Navigating threats. Proving that their defiance had been the start of something better. Not just a brief act of suicide. But that work would happen tomorrow and in the years beyond. Tonight, Jiwan allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. They had done something that mattered. Changed something that needed changing. Stood when everyone else had learned to kneel. That was worth the risks they had taken. Worth the challenges that lay ahead. She thought about all the species that had watched their defiance. The shocked silence after that single word. The chaos when they revealed their capabilities. The flood of review requests that followed. How many of those species had wanted to resist but thought it was impossible? How many had submitted because no one had shown them another option?